exfil window that was not ambush element and given nothing back. Nothing back. Then the shots came to the right of the northeast.
The call sign came in at Oro 347. Not through the encrypted net. Not through the primary radio, which had died in the first 30 seconds of the ambush, along with half the gear they'd been counting on. It came through a backup field set that Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb had jury-rigged to a spare battery in the chaos after the shooting stopped. An old analog unit, the kind that predated the digital systems everyone had stopped thinking about, because digital never failed. Except tonight, digital had failed. Tonight, everything had failed in the same 10 seconds.
Static. Then a voice, female, low, without urgency.
Delta element, hold position. Do not push north.
Copy. Holding.
You will hit your own man. Stay frosty.
Static. Then a voice, female, low, without urgency. Delta element, hold position. Do not push north. You will hit your own man. Webb had his rifle up before the transmission finished. He swept the tree line on automatic. Dense Carolina forest, old growth canopy so thick the pre-dawn sky above it was simply a slightly different shade of black. Nothing moved. Nothing showed heat. Nothing cracked a branch. "Who is on this frequency?" he said. Not a question. A warning issued to a dark he couldn't read. No answer came back. The man to his immediate left, Hendricks, 24 years old, and the newest rotation on the team, touched Webb's arm once, which was the signal for look without saying look. Webb followed the gesture north. Sergeant Dale Morrow was coming back in on his elbows, face low, moving in the slow, controlled way of a man who understood that moving fast right now meant dying fast right now. He was 40 meters out and working back toward the perimeter with the discipline of someone who had practiced this crawl until it became the same as breathing.
You have 30 seconds to identify yourself, or I classify this frequency as hostile. Acknowledge.
If they had pushed north, if Webb had listened to the instinct that said, push the gap and find the threat, Morrow would have taken a round from someone on his own team in the dark. The voice had known, before Webb had known, before anyone had moved. Webb keyed the handset. You have 30 seconds to identify yourself, or I classify this frequency as hostile. Acknowledge. The silence stretched to 20. Then, 6 shooters, northeast quadrant, 300 meters, staggered, moving in pairs toward your perimeter. You have 4 minutes before they are inside effective range. Lieutenant Commander Garrett Hale was at the center of the perimeter with the map board and the 2 men who needed evacuation before they needed anything else. Kowalski had a through and through in the lower leg that was stable but wouldn't stay that way indefinitely. Alvarez had taken shrapnel across the left side and was running on adrenaline and stubbornness and the particular pride of a man who would not let the team carry him while he could still function on his own.
The voice knew their position.
Hale heard the transmission. He was the kind of officer who did not spend energy being surprised by things that had already happened, because being surprised was a luxury that consumed the same mental space needed to decide what to do next. He processed the voice, cross-referenced it against the available information, and arrived at a conclusion with the speed of someone who had been doing this long enough to have it feel like intuition, even when it was just math. The voice knew their frequency. The voice knew their position. The voice had information about the enemy element that Hale's team did not have. Either the voice was an elaborate layer of whatever had just tried to kill them, or the voice was something else entirely. He looked at Webb. Webb looked at him.
Hale counted. He watched the northeast and thought about everything that was wrong with this situation.
Webb gave a very small shake of his head. That meant I don't know either, sir, but my read is we listen. All elements, Hale said, flat and quiet. Nobody fires northeast. Hold the line. Acknowledge. Acknowledgements came back in twos. 8 men, 8 positions, 8 rifles that did not swing northeast. The 4 minutes passed the way time passes when no one is breathing properly. Faster than it should have been and heavier than it felt. Hale counted. He watched the northeast and thought about everything that was wrong with this situation. The destroyed primary comms, the 2 men down, the air assets he couldn't reach, the exfil window that was not infinite, the forest that had swallowed the ambush element and given nothing back. Then the shots came. Not from within the perimeter. From above and to the right of the northeast tree line, from a position on the ridge that no one had been watching because the ridge was steep and dark and presented as empty. Single reports. Bolt action rhythm, that specific cadence of a manually cycled rifle being worked with precision. 1. A pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. 2. The same pause. 3. No hurry. No spray. No automatic fire filling the dark with noise and hoping some of it landed somewhere useful. 5. 6. Silence. The pause that followed was the most complete silence Hale had experienced in 11 years of this work. Not the silence of nothing happening.
The last 3 were moving when they went down, he said. She was tracking moving targets at ranges past 300 meters.
The silence of everything having already happened, and the aftermath not yet having found its shape. Webb walked the northeast gaff at first light, or as close to first light as Hale was willing to give him. He was back in 9 minutes. 6 down, he said, standing in front of Hale with the particular expression of a man recalibrating what he thought he knew. Staggered positions, exactly as described. Distances run from 280 to 340 meters from the shooter's position on the ridge. Crosswind was running 18 miles per hour tonight. I checked the gauge when we inserted, force of habit. He paused. The last 3 were moving when they went down, he said. She was tracking moving targets at ranges past 300 meters in darkness, with an 18-mile crosswind from an elevated position that required her to compensate for angle and drop simultaneously. She cycled 6 shots and hit 6 times. The 6th man made it to a fallen log, maybe 3 steps of cover, before he dropped behind it. She hit him behind the log, Hale said.
You cleared our northeast approach.
I need a face-to-face.
Acknowledge.
She hit him before he got there, Webb said. He just landed behind it. Hale was quiet for a moment. Boot prints? 1 set. Small, soft sole. No tread pattern I've seen before. Old hunting boot, hand-oiled leather. The kind you resole twice before you replace. Entry point through the canopy gap on the northeast ridge, single lane about 16 inches wide. She moved through there in full dark without a moonlight window. No broken branches. No broken branches. No kicked stones. The pine duff on the slope isn't even shifted from where she placed her feet. He paused again. Sir, I'm telling you what I saw, and I'm having some trouble believing it. Hale went back to the backup radio. Unknown contact. This is Lieutenant Commander Garrett Hale, Delta Element, JTF SITS Support Attachment. You cleared our northeast approach. I need a face-to-face. Acknowledge. Static for 8 seconds. Then, I'm already here. She came out of the south side of the perimeter. The south side. The direction every man had not been watching because the threat had come from the northeast, and human attention is a pointed thing that goes where it last saw danger. 3 operators closest to that edge went to their weapons the way a reflex goes to a reflex. Not thought, not decision, just the body doing what 10,000 hours of training had drilled into it. She didn't stop walking. She didn't raise her hands. She moved with the same flat calm as the voice on the radio. And something about that calm, the absence of the performance that people put on when they want you to know they're not a threat, worked better than any performance would have. She was not trying to look harmless. She simply was not afraid, which is a different thing. She was in her mid-30s, though the paint made precise reading difficult. Red and black in 2 diagonal stripes from each temple to jaw, applied cleanly, not smeared, the kind of application that takes time and intention. Her hair was dark auburn, nearly red in the pale tactical lights, braided in 2 thick plaits that fell forward over the canvas jacket. Around her neck, 3 cord necklaces layered at different lengths, feathers, and small carved shapes in bone or claw that moved slightly when she walked. The jacket itself was old canvas, with no patches, no insignia, no rank. Her boots were exactly what Webb had described. Old leather, resoled, oiled to a dark finish. The rifle on her back was a Winchester Model 70, bolt action, old cane barrel, with the specific color of a weapon that has lived most of its life outdoors. The Leupold scope on the receiver was worn enough that the markings on the adjustment turrets had rubbed away. It was not a military rifle. It was the kind of rifle that a family keeps in a particular corner of a particular room and argues about who will carry it next. Hale stepped forward. His hand was near his sidearm, but not on it, which was the closest to neutral he could get right now. Name and authority. She unslung the Winchester, reversed it so the muzzle pointed down and away, and held it horizontal across both forearms. Not a surrender, not an offer, just a visible displacement of the weapon, so her intent could be read without requiring trust. Then she reached into the inside pocket of the jacket with 2 fingers, removed a laminated card, and held it out. Hale took it. The seal on the card was United States Special Operations Command. The text was brief and professionally spare in the way of documents written by people who understand that brevity is its own kind of authority. Cherokee Nation Liaison, Special Reconnaissance Unit, Joint Task Force, 6 Support Element. A clearance designation Hale had seen before only on documents that arrived in sealed envelopes, got read once, and went into locked safes. And beneath that, a single line that served in place of a name. Code name, Red Phantom. Webb was reading over his shoulder. He was quiet for a moment that lasted exactly long enough to feel weighted. Then he said very quietly, like a man who has just confirmed something he wasn't sure he was allowed to confirm out loud. Red Phantom is real. Hale kept his eyes on the woman. Explain. There's a story that runs through the community, Webb said, his voice still low. 3 years, maybe 4, a Cherokee tracker attached to JTF-6, Forest Terrain Specialist. Clearance level that nobody can pin down. Mission record that apparently exists somewhere above the classification ceiling of anyone who's tried to pull it. A lot of people treated it as one of those things that circulates because people want it to be true. The The woman watched this exchange without expression. She had not introduced herself beyond the card. She did not look like someone who considered that an omission worth addressing. "How long were you in this AO before we inserted?" Hale asked her. 18 hours. You tracked the ambush element before we arrived. From their staging point, 7 kilometers northeast. The terrain here forced the engagement. This is the only corridor wide enough for an extraction that can't be flanked from the ridge. They knew that. I knew they knew that. Why didn't you warn us before the ambush hit? Something moved behind her eyes that wasn't quite expression. The absence of it changed shape. Your comms were clean when you inserted. I tried routing a contact warning through JTF-6 relay at 02180. The relay went dark at the same time your primary radio was hit, which tells me the ambush element had someone watching the relay station, or had prior intelligence on your comms architecture. I had no channel to you until Sergeant Webb activated the backup set. Hale ran the math. He had been on the ground for 9 hours. This woman had been inside the same forest for 18, watching, tracking, waiting for a channel that almost never opened. You could have identified yourself when we inserted, he said. Made contact on site. You would have ordered me to pull back from the surveillance position, she said. Standard protocol when an unknown element is operating in a friendly AO. I would have lost the track. You would have had the ambush with no warning at all. She said it without heat, without the faint edge of self-justification that people use when they're not quite certain they made the right call. She said it the way she'd said everything else, as a statement of observed fact. He didn't tell her she was right, but he stopped asking questions about the decision. The team medic was still working Kowalski's leg. Alvarez had sat himself against a pine with a field dressing pressed to his side and the expression of someone who has decided that sitting down is acceptable, but lying down is not happening. The alternate exfil was 30 minutes out. 2 MH-60s running the eastern creek bed as approach cover, and the forest around the perimeter had returned to the heavy quiet that follows completed violence. Red Phantom had taken a position near the perimeter's southern edge. Not quite inside the circle, not quite outside it. She was reading the tree line in the systematic way of someone running a continuous process rather than performing an action. Eyes moving in a pattern, processing input the rest of them weren't equipped to receive. Private First Class Torres, 22, and on his second rotation, had been watching her for about 10 minutes when he decided the alternative to saying something was staring at the back of her head until the exfil arrived, which was its own kind of rude. Can I ask you something? She didn't look at him. Yes. How do you read it like that? The forest. I've been watching you and you're getting information from somewhere I can't find. She was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of ignoring the question. The quiet of someone deciding whether the answer is translatable. The forest is not silent, she said. It is full of language. The birds tell you where ground-level movement is happening. The insects tell you where it stopped. The canopy tells you wind direction and change at every height simultaneously, which is information a weather gauge at insertion altitude cannot give you. The ground itself, the way water moves through it, the way roots hold it, tells you what weight has passed over it and how recently. She paused. You have all of this information every time you enter terrain. You were just trained to ignore it in favor of instruments. Torres nodded slowly. He wasn't sure he'd absorbed all of it, but he understood the shape of what she'd said. Webb returned from a second perimeter walk and stopped next to Hale. The boot track goes back into the ridge about 60 meters before the canopy closes it off. She moved through there without a light, I'm almost certain. The gap she used has 2 branches at face height on the entry side, both still in their original position. Hale said nothing. He was watching her watch the forest. Community Story has her as Cherokee Nation, grew up in the southern Appalachians, Webb continued. Family hunters going back multiple generations. Story says JTF-6 picked her up after a situation in the Nantahala forest, maybe 8 years ago. A missing persons case that became a counter-trafficking operation. She went in as a tracker and apparently ran most of the operational element before it was done. That piece is sealed at a level I can't get to. What's her name? Not on the card. Do you have it through any other channel? Webb shook his head. I don't think we're supposed to. There are stories from this era of service that have no official record. Names that got sealed before the debrief finished. Actions that exist only in the memories of the people who were present. If you want 3 of those stories written out in full, in the detail this format doesn't have time to hold, the free ebook at the link below carries them without a credit card or a catch. It's there because some things deserve more than a video. The birds in the southeast corner of the canopy shifted at +8. Red Phantom was already on her feet and facing that direction before Hale registered the sound as different. She held one hand low and flat. Hold, not a conscious signal, more like a reflex that happened to communicate, and stood completely still for 4 seconds, reading something the rest of them could not hear properly through the noise of their own preparation. Then her hand dropped. Civilians, she said. 2, moving away from us. They heard the rotors early. The MH-60s came in at 0519, low and fast, rotor wash bending the upper canopy as they flared to land in the creek bed, clearing 200 meters east. The team moved to the extraction point with the organized speed of people who have practiced this under conditions worse than these. Hale fell back to the rear of the movement, which put him near the tree line. He turned. She was still at the perimeter edge. Winchester back on her shoulder, watching the team move out with the expression of someone completing a task and moving cleanly to the next one. "You're not coming out with us," he said. "My surveillance position is not finished. There is a secondary element that's staged separately. I tracked them to a position 5 kilometers north before I repositioned here. I need to run that track to conclusion before I can call the AO clear. I can request a dedicated asset, get you air support. Air support in this canopy density is decorative." He almost smiled. He didn't quite get there. "I can get you a ride out and a reinsertion with a full kit package. I have everything I need," she said, "and a way out when I'm done." He believed her without needing to ask for details, which was itself a strange thing to notice. That he trusted the logistics of a woman he had known for approximately 90 minutes, whose name he did not have, whose file was above his clearance level, whose operational history existed only as a story that circulated through the community as something people wanted to be true. He looked at the Winchester. That shot at 340, moving target, 18-mile crosswind, dark. Your elevation differential was steeper than I'd want to calculate from. "The wind doesn't change the fundamentals," she said. "It changes the variable you solve for. My grandfather taught me to shui when I was 6 years old. He said the rifle doesn't know how old it is, and the wind doesn't know it's supposed to make things harder. Only the shooter knows those things, so the shooter has to know them better. Hale was quiet for a moment. Behind him, he could hear the team loading, hear the crew chief calling the count, hear the particular organized noise of 8 trained men doing a thing they've done many times, trying to do it one more time correctly. He reached out his hand. She looked at it for a half second. Not hesitation, just the brief calibration of someone for whom the gesture is not automatic. Then took it. Firm, brief, no ceremony. "Thank you," he said. "You would have found a way," she said. "You had good men. We had help we didn't know we needed." She reached up to the lowest cord of the 3 necklaces at her collar and worked a small knot loose with 2 fingers. A single feather came free, dark, hawk-shaped, with a pale bar near the tip. She held it toward him in an open palm. He took it. "The forest will remember this," she said, "even if the report doesn't." She turned, stepped back into the tree line. The Carolina forest accepted her the way it had apparently always accepted her. Without sound, without disturbance, without a single branch registering that a person had passed through it. The dark between the trees was exactly as dark as it had been. Hale stood at the perimeter edge for 3 seconds longer than he needed to, looking at the place where she had been. Then he turned and ran for the bird. The debrief was 48 hours later. A room at Fort Bragg with no windows, good air conditioning, and a very short attendee list. Hale submitted a contact report listing Red Phantom as a JTF-6 liaison element who had provided direct combat support, delivered actionable enemy intelligence, and neutralized 6 enemy personnel under adverse conditions during the operation. He attached the clearance code from her card. He formally requested that her full mission file be appended to the after-action record. The response came back in 12 hours. The clearance code was verified and valid. The identity associated with it was classified at a level above his current access tier. The contact report would be accepted, logged, and sealed under the parent classification of the JTF-6 support program. No further information would be made available through this channel or any channel accessible to personnel at his clearance level. Her name would not appear in the report. It would not appear because it was not in the accessible system. It was not in the accessible system because the accessible system was not the system she lived in. She existed officially as a clearance level, and a code name and a mission history that began and ended at classification walls taller than anyone in that debrief room was built to climb. Webb tried the Nantahala file through a different routing, denied at the first gate, politely but completely. Torres carried the story for 6 months, adding nothing and removing nothing, keeping it exact the way you keep something exact when you understand that the exact version is already better than anything you could add to it. He told it finally in a bar in Fayetteville to a buddy from a different unit on a Thursday night when the bar was quiet enough to hear it properly. His buddy said it sounded like something someone had made up. A woman who moved through trees without sound, 6 shots in 4 minutes, an ID card with no name, a feather left behind like a signature on a document no one would ever see. Torres didn't argue. He reached into his jacket and put the feather on the bar. His buddy looked at it for a long time, turning it in the light from the Budweiser sign. "Is it real?" he said finally. Torres picked it up, turned it once, and tucked it back away. "The forest is full of language," he said. "She told me that." You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. His buddy was quiet for a moment. What was her name? Torres shook his head. I don't think we're supposed to know. Some names never made it into the record. Some actions got classified before anyone wrote them down. Some people served in ways that history isn't allowed to confirm yet, and may never be. If that silence feels like something to you, the free ebook in the link below carries 3 real wartime stories told in full, in the detail this format doesn't have space for. No credit card, no catch. It's there because the record isn't always the whole story. Link is in the description.